Sunday mornings we're talking about the Christ Mass. We're headed into the Christ Mass season. Whether people believe it or not, Christmas is Roman Catholicism. It was against the law 300 years ago to celebrate Christmas in America in the Puritan society. The Puritans fled the papal persecution of England and of Europe, and they said, you will not bring this into our churches. The Baptist Church 150 years ago would have nothing to do with the Christ Mass. If you look up Christmas in religious encyclopedias or the Encyclopedia Britannica or the Americana, these encyclopedias will tell you that the word Christmas comes from Christus, C-H-R-I-S, T-E-S, M-A-E-S-S-E. That's an old ancient English word. C-H-R. Christus Mass. Our Christus Mass, or the Mass of Christ. Now, don't you believe that Mass means a festival. That's not what it means. Mass is eating human flesh. Now, that's what they did in the ancient world. The Lord told Israel, He said, if you cease to be obedient to my word, He said, I'll send 4 judgments. I will send the sword. I will send the famine. I will send the pestilence. And I will send the beast. The beast was the world-ruling system. The Babylonian lion, the Persian bear, the Grecian leopard, and Rome, which was a composite of these 3 over there in Daniel 7, Revelation 12, Revelation 13, Hosea the 13th chapter. This is the world beast system, and that would scatter Israel all over the place, all over the face of the earth. The sword would be usually about the 3rd judgment that would come. God would send famine, pestilence, and then He said, I'll send the sword. He said, I'll put you inside a city. I'll cut off all supply lines to the city. And then He said, I will cause you to eat your children. And that's exactly what Israel did. In fact, I had a paper that I did on this called Israel Eats Their Children. And that's exactly what He did. He said, I'll cause you to eat your children. And they became involved in what was called Baal worship. Baal was just a common, generic, everyday term. That word would be put on the end of a man's name. Baal meant the Lord. Is all it meant. Well, of course, Baal was a generic term to take the place of Christ, the Lord Jesus Christ. And Baal was introduced into Israel as the national god of Israel in the 16th chapter of 1 Kings. Baal and the Ashtaroth. Let me write down Ashtaroth. A-S-H-T-O-R-E-T-H. If it's spelled with an O, it is plural. A-S-H-T-O-R-T-O-R-O-T-H. That is plural. E-T-H is singular. And the Ashtaroth were all the female deities, and they called them the grove. And it was nothing but a generic term. The word grove is A-S-H-E-R-A-H, Asherah, and Asherah means upright. It was an upright tree goddess, and they cut a tree out of the forest. They decked it with silver and gold, and that is the color of the garlands of the Christmas tree. Now, that is the Christmas tree, whether anybody likes it or not. The tree worship, there was one tree worship in the ancient world, and Israel became involved in it, and they became involved in Baal. The priests of Baal, they worshiped Baal, and it was Ahab and Jezebel that introduced Baal worship as the national god of Israel, and the grove as the national goddess. They actually built temples to these 2 deities, and they came out of, when Jezebel married Ahab, her father was the priest. See where Beirut, Lebanon is right there? Her father, Ethbaal, was a priest of the Baal gods of Babylon. He was a priest of the Ashtaroth of Babylon, according to the historians, and he kept this system alive and well, and he was compared with Satan himself in Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, when he's called the Prince of Tyre. When Jezebel, the queen of northern Israel, married Ahab, she was a priestess of Ashtaroth, of the tree goddess, and she was a priestess of Baal, and she married Ahab. And we know that Baal worship had been in Israel before, but it had never been the national god and goddess of Israel. And they made this the national god of Israel. And God said, for that I will bring the sword, the famine, the pestilence, and the beast. And there in the 17th chapter of 1 Kings, that's when Elijah came out of the woodwork. He just came out of the desert. We don't know whether he was a Jew. We have no idea what his nationality was. Some believe that he may have been an Arab, but he was certainly the elect prophet of God. He came out and he said, Ahab, no rain for 3.5 years, and that was the judgment of God, and they became involved in Baal worship. Of course, we've said this so many times. Baal is meant the Lord, and priest is the word Kahan or Khan, K-H-A-N or K-A-H-A-N. Now, if you see somebody, C-O-H-E-N, Cohen, there was a gangster in the 40s in the United States. His name was Mickey Cohen. Well, Mickey Cohen was a gangster. He was a Jew. Cohen comes from Kahan. It is our translation of the word Kahan or priest. Now, Kahan is the word priest, and they were priests of Baal. Of course, the priests of Baal tried to imitate and emulate the priests of the living God. The priests of God offered literal lambs and bullocks on their altars, depending on whether they were cleansing the temple or cleansing the priesthood, or whether it was the daily sacrifice of a lamb at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the evening. Well, they offered lambs on their altars, and that altar was right in front of the eastern gate of the tabernacle or the temple, and they would offer. You had the brazen sea right there, and right beside that, right in east of that, was the altar, and the altar was where they offered all the burnt offerings, and the priest would take a flesh hook and dip it down into that offering, and that's what the priests that were on duty in the temple, there's the temple, there's the veil, here's the Ark of the Covenant on the western end, and the 7 candlesticks was on the south section of the holy place, and you had the altar of incense and the table of showbread on the northern side of that. Well, they would eat from this. In the 2nd chapter of 1 Samuel, it was the custom of the priests to, when they were on duty for 7 days, and they would eat from that altar. Well, and they had leg of lamb or they had beef, depending on what the offering was. Well, the priests of Baal offered sacrifice on their altars, and they offered human sacrifice, and they were Kahan Baals, and they offered human sacrifice. Therefore, they were consumers or devourers of human flesh, and we have shortened Kahan Baal to C-A-H-A-N-A, Kana Baal, or as we would call it, C-A-N-N-I-B-A-L, cannibal, and that is an eater or a devourer of human flesh. That's what Israel became involved in. That is the Christ Mass. That is what the Mass is. Whenever the Roman Catholic priests throughout the world hold up a little round Eucharist, they say that something magical happens to those elements, and when that happens, they say it turns into the literal body of Christ. I've got something here I'd like to read to you. I hadn't read in a while. And if they believe that, I've got a little thing called the Roman miracle. I'd like to read this to you. And they don't really believe that turns into the literal body of Christ, because they say whatever it was before, it's no longer that. It's a cracker before, and it becomes the literal body of Christ. And that is a perversion of the verse there in the 6th chapter of John, where Jesus said, except you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. Well, eat flesh and drink blood was an old ancient term that meant to partake in a slaughter. We are lambs to the slaughter daily, and he tells us what eat flesh and drink blood is when he said, my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. The word indeed, I have never heard anybody else define this. The word indeed is the word A-L-E-T-H-E-S, and that word means of truth. Of course, we know the word truth is A-L-E-T-H-E-I-A, aletheia, and it comes from the word L-A-N-T-H-A-N-O, lanthano. That word lanthano in the Greek means to lie hid. To lie hid. When you place the alpha, which is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, in front of a word, as a negative particle, it negates the word, gives a complete opposite meaning. When you place the alpha privative in front of lanthano, it translates to the word truth. So when you eat flesh and drink blood, you partake in a slaughter because you don't hide anything. You define the word. You say this is an infinitive and this is a participle. And I understand everybody can't do that. But you don't hide anything about what you know. You read your Bible. You tell all the truth. So when you don't hide anything, what happens? You go through a trial or a fiery trial or a blood baptism, because when you start telling the truth, people get angry and they say that Jim Brown is angry. Well, I'm supposed to be angry. If you're not angry, there's something wrong with you. If you're not angry at the false doctrines, the winds of doctrines over there in the 4th chapter of Ephesians, the 26th verse, the Bible commands us, be angry. And that's not an invitation. That's an imperative mood, O-R-G-I-Z-O-M-A-I, or gizomai is an imperative mood. That's a command to everyone concerning the winds of doctrine. And the Christ Mass, Mass is eating human flesh. The Mass is everything that Roman Catholicism is built upon. It's the foundation. The foundation is not the confessional. The foundation is not the counting the beads and saying your little rosary. The foundation is the Mass. Everything is built around that. We've got people who are Catholics. Debbie used to be a Catholic. Who else was a Catholic here? You were Catholic. You know what that's about. Anita was Catholic. It's about the Mass, and people will say, well, we don't believe that that really returns in the body of Christ. Yes, they do, and if you're Catholic, you don't believe that, you're not a good Catholic. Isn't that right? Let me read this. They don't believe that. The Roman miracle. This comes out of Babylon Mystery Religions. I hadn't read this in a while. A pretty maid, a Protestant, was to a Catholic wed. To love all Bible truths and tales, quite early she's been bred. It sorely grieved her husband's heart that she would not comply and join the mother church of Rome and heretics deny. Day by day, he flattered her, but still she saw no good would ever come from bowing down to idols made of wood. The Mass, the host, the miracles were made but to deceive, and transubstantiation too she'd never dare believe. He went to see his clergyman and told him his sad tale. My wife is an unbeliever, sir. You can perhaps prevail. For all your Romish miracles, my wife has strong aversion. To really work a miracle may lead to her conversion. The priest went with the gentleman. He thought to gain a prize. He said, I will convert her, sir, and open her eyes. So when they came into the house, the husband loudly cried, the priest has come to dine with us. He's welcome, she replied. And when at last the meal was o'er, the priest at once began to teach his hostess all about the sinful state of man. The greatness of our Savior's love, which Christians can't deny, to give himself a sacrifice for our sins to die. I will return tomorrow, lass, prepare some bread and wine. The sacramental miracle will stop your soul's decline. I'll bake the bread, the lady said. You may, he did reply. And when you've seen this miracle, convinced you'll be, say I. The priest did some accordingly. the bread and wine did bless, the lady asked, Sir, is it changed? The priest answered, Yes. It's changed from common bread and wine to truly flesh and blood. Begor, alas, this power of mine has changed it into God. So having blessed the bread and wine, to eat they did prepare. The lady said unto the priest, I warn you to take care, for half an ounce of arsenic was mixed right in the batter, but since you have its nature changed, it cannot really matter. The priest was struck real dumb. He looked as pale as death. The bread and wine fell from his hands, and he did gasp for breath. Bring me my horse, the priest cried. This is a cursed home. The lady replied, Begone, 'tis you who shares the curse of Rome. The husband, too, he sat surprised, and not a word did say. At length he spake, My dear, said he, the priest has run away. To gulp such mummery and tripe, I'm not for sure quite able. I'll go with you, and we'll renounce this Roman Catholic fable. If you believe that, put a little arsenic in it. That is the Mass. They say they change it into a God. They give a sacrifice every day, a new God. And if y'all want a copy of that, they'll make a copy of that after church, okay? What Israel became involved in was the Mass. That goes back to the Garden of Eden. Let me tell you what Christmas is. Christmas is the doctrine of money. It is the tree worship. Always the grove was represented as a tree. That goes back to the Garden of Eden. The consort of the tree, since the wood gives fuel to the fire was the representative upon the earth of the sun. And the sun god in the ancient world was worshipped as the orb of the day, since Satan was the enlightener of men's minds, and it goes back to the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is where it goes back to. They worship the sun, they worship the serpent, and of course the serpent was the first familiar spirit. Familiar, we get the word family. Familiar spirits were the ancestors, that was the ancestor worship that went back usually through the father's side of the family. They call that fellowship or soy. And when Jesus came to the man in Luke 8, he said, T, soy, esti no noma. He didn't say, what is your name, to the man that was supposedly having the demons. Christmas is demon worship, is what it is. And it's worship of the tree. It's the worship of self, and it's consuming one's own flesh. In the 4th chapter of Ecclesiastes, Solomon said, the fool folds his hands. He sits back and relaxes and eats his own flesh. That's the words. That's the Christ Mass. The first Mass was Eve eating of her own flesh. Let me tell you what will happen when you get involved in the tree. The grove was always represented by the tree. Sometimes that was Venus. And that time she was represented as there was a sign that was given to her. That was a fish, the sign of the fish. And she was androgynous. Androgynous means she was a dual sexual person. When she was a male, she was called A-L-L-A-H, Allah. Allah comes from A-L-L-O-N. That is the word oak. And he was worshipped as the oak tree. The oak tree was the key tree of the Druids, or the Celtic religion, the Celtic form of the Christ Mass. And the feast was equated with that. When Constantine brought this worship into the church, he brought it in the church in 324 A.D., and he organized what was called the Mass. Up to this time, no one had celebrated the birth of Christ, that the church had not put its approval upon the birth of Christ. If you let me say not the birth of Christ, the birth of Jesus. If you celebrate the birth of Jesus, you don't celebrate the birth of God, because Jesus was never born as a God, was he? You have to celebrate the man only. When Constantine started Roman Catholicism in 312 A.D., he issued something called an Edict of Toleration. Whenever I call the Baptist Catholic, I was raised in a Baptist preacher's home. I was ordained in a Southern Baptist church. It's because I know those guys. Let me tell you what they're doing. They are tolerating sin. They won't preach against it. They don't want anybody angry. They want everybody to be nice to one another. The world has become Roman Catholic. It's already Catholic. It's Babylonian is what it is. And of course, Christmas didn't hit any calendar until 354 A.D. Doesn't matter whether people believe that or not. That's when it hit the calendar. It was against the law in early America. The Puritans would have nothing to do with it. It is the Mass. It was a festival that started on December the 17th. December the 17th. It lasted till December the 24th. And that was called Mother Night in the ancient world. We call it Christ Mass Eve. Eve, the mother of all living. It was called Mother or Eve's Night. Mother Night, Eve's Night. And the next morning, when they threw the Yule log on the fire, the Yule log, the word Yule, it's an old Scandinavian word. It means wheel, and the fire wheel. They rolled a wheel down the hill, and if it reached so far, if it go to a certain point, they would have a good crop. And they worshiped the fire god during the winter solstice that came December the 22nd, the longest nights of the year. They thought the sun was going to burn out, and they said, we don't want to starve to death. Well, God said, I am the fertility God. I'll be a God unto you and to your people and to your seed after you, Abraham, in their generations as they come along. And your basket will be full, your womb will be full, your land will be full. You'll have plenty of corn, plenty of wheat, you'll have plenty of cattle. But if you do not obey my words, he said, I'll clear the land out, and you'll have famine and pestilence throughout the land. That's exactly what happened to Israel. Let me show you Yule. I bought a new book. We are a Celtic society. A lot of people don't realize that. The Celts, all Christmas is the Celtic. Our Christmas is Celtic in its origin and its form. I've got some things I want to read to you here out of several books, and these people seem to know more than our people today. We are Celtic in our... Hold on a second. Let me see here if this is the one. Yeah, listen to this. Listen to this. This is from a Celtic Tree Ministries. The Celts are the Britons, the British, the Germans, the Scandinavian, the Nordic people, and the Dutch. The Caucasians is what it is. The Caucasian mountains were located between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. That's where the Assyrians. Now Henry's not, he's not Celtic, he's Babylonian. Congratulations. The Celts were the Caucasians. The Caucasus Mountains is where the Assyrians settled. The Assyrians were the most barbarous people that ever lived. But in the Bible, God doesn't separate the Assyrians from the Babylonians. So the blacks and the whites were the same to God. There wasn't but two races with God. That was Jew and Gentile. You had to be circumcised of the heart to be a Jew. Henry and I are brothers. He may be black, I may be white. Well, not maybe, you are, aren't you? And I am. This is not white. The word white, I've told people this. They worship the Lord Moon. One of the words, I believe this is where they get white people. The word moon is L-E-B, Lebanah. We get the word Lebanon from that, and that's where Mr. F. Bale was from, right there about Beirut. Lebanah, and that word, it's the word moon. It means white. These people were the moon worshippers here. The Caucasus people in the Caucasus Mountains, they were moon worshippers. I believe that's where we get the word white, because that ain't white. Now, let me read this. The Caucasian America, I've wondered why there's been so much hatred among the races here, but I believe the white America is one of the most godless people that's ever existed. It's Celtic in origin. Can it be said that we're all Celts? This is from the Celtic Tree Ministries. Can it be said that we're all Celts? Certainly Western civilization owes as much, if not more, to our Celtic heritage as to Greek and Roman influences. They seem to have come from a civilization centered in Greece near the Aegean Sea in the 3rd and 4th millennia and moving out across Europe, occupying areas from Russia to Spain and finally Scotland and Ireland in 1472 BC. We got our Celtic art and music, and we're enjoying a renaissance today. Of particular interest is the Grail legend. All that the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table were, that was the Celtic form. It was nothing less than just the Celtic form of sun worship, is all it was. In fact, Merlin was said to be the Celtic Zeus, and he was in love with Our Lady of the Lake. Now, we're not unfamiliar with the fact that all of the churches in America, half the Catholic churches, call themselves Lady of the Lake. That was called Morgana, or Morgan Le Fay, and she was Our Lady of the Lake. We got Our Lady of the Lake Catholic Church here in town. We've got, in the Lady of the Lake, in the ancient world, the mother of all the rivers was one called Artemis or Diana. Greatest Diana of the Ephesians in the 19th chapter of Acts. It was Alexander. People say you shouldn't call people's names. It was Alexander, a Christian at the church at Ephesus, and he was a worker in these shrines of Diana that backed up the pagans when they pushed Paul into the theater. And Paul said, Timothy, there's a man named Alexander down there. He said, you watch out here for him. Be aware of Alexander. He's a Christian, and he won't take a stand for the truth. Calls himself a Christian. Of particular interest is the Grail legend. Carl Jung called the most recent of the great myths to surface from the collective unconscious, constituting the primary myth of Western civilization. The Grail legend offers us the means to find our way to the other world. The Grail legend was nothing less than a seeking after some magical desires to fulfill the lust of the flesh. That's all it was. It is a reaching of the great goals of life. That's what the Grail was. The Grail, to reach our way to the other world and to come back again richer, wiser, healed, and whole. Sounds like, wait a minute, the Devil's Broadcasting Network. DBN, they call it TBN. There is a system in the world they're going, that's what the search for the Holy Grail was. Let me read that again. Make you richer, wiser, healed, and whole. What did they seek when they sought the tree? 1 John 2:16, 17. John said, all that, this is what Christmas is about. It goes back. When all that is in the world, when Nimrod started the Babylonian system, it was a reinstitution of the tree worship of the Garden of Eden, is all it was. All that is in the world. Here's everything in the world. I'm going to keep preaching this because Christmas is, let me write something up here. Christmas is, it's nothing but the old worship of self. It's consuming one's own flesh. Christmas is money worship. It is the worship. It's the worship of things and stuff. It's the worship of all that is in the world. This is it. This is what the Christ Mass was originated for. All that's in the world, the lust of the flesh. Covetousness is idolatry, Paul said. Covetousness is Pleonektes, and that word means, this is the word covetous, it means want more. That's all that Eve wanted. She wanted all that's in the world. She saw a tree that was good for food. Good for food, John said. Good for food. John said all that's in the world is the lust of the flesh. It will fulfill her flesh. The lust of the eyes. The lust of the eyes. Oops, I got it in the wrong place. It was pleasant to the eyes. Eve saw a tree that was pleasant to the eyes. The lust of the eyes, John said. And the pride of life. Pride of life. Pride is when a man looks at himself and he thinks he's wise and he thinks he understands things. She saw a tree that would make her wise. This is everything that Christ's Mass is about. That's what it was started for, was to rebel against God. Let me read the rest of this. Make richer, wiser. Where is this thing alive and well today? It's these preachers that preach a money gospel. That's the real Mass. It's consuming one's own flesh. It's more than just that little quacker. That's a diversion nowadays. The real Mass is eating one's own flesh and saying God wants you rich and healthy as a horse. That's what they say up here at the Devil's Broadcasting Network. And devil is D-A-I-M-O-N. That is one of the words for devil. And any time a man was possessed with the devil, that's the word. It means distribute fortunes. Wait a minute. Isn't that all that's in the world? It all goes back to the garden. That's all it is. The Celtic worldview is a magical one. That's what they're looking for, is magic, things and stuff. It is true that we are all Celts. Now, I know brown is German, but that's Celtic. This is a Celt system. The Celts were the white nations of Europe seeking a mass, a self-system. It is true we're all Celts, for even the most humble of us must face the challenges of Arthur and Guinevere. Now, the whole purpose among the authorities, the only reason Arthur was seeking Guinevere was for the sake of the land. Did not God say, I'll increase the yield of your land? What was it she was seeking? The tree of the land, wasn't it? That's what she was seeking, the tree. And the tree was said to be the giver of all divine gifts to men. That's why you find the gifts at the base of the tree. It is true that we are all Celts, for even the most humble of us must face the challenges of Arthur and Guinevere and of Merlin or Zeus. There was nothing less than Saturn or Cush, the father of Nimrod, who began Babel. Of Merlin and Morgan Le Fay in our own lives. Like the Knights of the Round Table, we all seek the Holy Grail in some shape or form. We're trying to get rich and wealthy. That's all the Grail was about. Like all great myths, the Grail legend is the model for the life we must live to bring this world and the other world together, and thus to restore the wholeness we were all meant to possess. That's what the search for the Grail was about. Let me read something to you out of it. Let me read this and I'll read it to you. The books of the Celtic Wisdom series comprise a magical curriculum embracing ideas and techniques that awaken the soul to the myths and legends, the psychological and spiritual truths, the inner power each of us can tap to meet the challenges of our time. That's all it was about. That's about the tree mysteries. There's 2 trees in the Garden of Eden, isn't there? Isn't there? There's the tree of life. Let me write it down. That's what this is all about. This was nothing but the ancestor worship. It's the worship of Adam and Eve. And when you worship the familiars, a familiar spirit was a family ancestor, a member of your family that was possessing you. That's when a man was possessed with demons. That's what it was about. It was about familiar spirits. All right. Now, I was going to write something down for you. I forgot what it was. Huh? The 2 trees. The 2 trees. There's 2 trees in the garden. There's the tree of life. You remember God put a cherubim at the gate of the garden to keep Adam and Eve from going back in and eating of the tree of life and living forever. So evidently, as soon as they came to the knowledge of good and evil, there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. And evil. Good and evil. Now that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that was what they took. What everyone has done is counterfeited and reversed everything. They called this was all that's in the world, all in the world, or the lust of the flesh is all it is. That's this tree. They took this tree and adapted the title for this tree over here. And the sign of Adam and Eve, this is the sign of Adam and Eve. The sign of Adam and Eve is the sign of the woman. They also call that the sign of Venus. Of course, if you look up the word wish in your Webster's dictionary, it'll tell you that it comes from the word Venus. And she got 3 wishes from this tree. And that's where the demon started. A demon was what the Jews called it. Genie was what the Arabs called it. What does a genie give you? 3 wishes. And the Romans called it Romans called it genius. And the Greeks called it guardian angel. The Roman Catholics call it patron saint. And all of these give you what you want. St. Nicholas is the patron saint of children. Christopher was the patron saint of travelers. They had all of these. I've got a book with all these so-called patron saints, and you get to ask for what you want. The only problem is that's not prayer. Prayer is the word proseuchomai, P-R-O-S-E-U-C-H-O-M-A-I, proseuchomai, and that word proseuchomai comes from pros, meaning forward, and euche, meaning to will forward. It means to bow to the will of God. It doesn't mean to ask a saint or a genie for what you want. And the American Indian called them totems. And they asked their totems, and it was all ancestor worship. And when you see the totem pole, and what's so amazing is when we were going to conquer the West, we went out there and took our Christmas to them. And in the Christ Mass, they had the tree worship, and the whole purpose of all the lights and the tapers, that was the sun worship, and we had the serpent worship. And we went and told the American Indians, hey, look what we've got. We've got Christmas, and they said, no, thank you. We already have it. We have the totem pole. They worship the fire, the sun, and they worship the rattlesnake. They already had the same system that we call the Christ Mass. Babylon was the mother of all idolatry, Revelation 17:5. The word idolatry, porneia. Harlotry. The whole system is about stuff, money. That's it. These people are involved in Adam and Eve worship that preach a money gospel. When they say, God wishes us to prosper and be in health. Look at that. Let's go over there. Look at that one more time, 3 John 2. That's nothing but they're seeking the Holy Grail. That's what they're doing. 3 John 2. 3 John 2. I have explained this so many times. Those people at the Devil's Broadcasting Network, they call it TBN. It has nothing to do with the Trinity. We call it DBN because it is the Devil's Broadcasting Network, because they distribute fortunes, don't they? Jesus said, in the world you shall have tribulation. Paul was not rich. He was running for his life. I like the Exodus, the 22nd chapter. The Bible says that if you oppress the poor, you oppress the widow and the orphan, if they cry unto me, I will hear them. I'll hear their cry, and I'll kill you with a sword. Fred Price, Kenneth Copeland. These guys are lying. They preach this and they take the Word of God and pervert it. 3 John 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers. The word prosper, I'm going to give it to you one more time, because they have perverted this into Holy Grail worship. Prosper is the word E-U-O-D-O-O. It is a construction of the little prefix U, E-U. We find that little prefix on the front of E-U-L-O-G-Y, eulogy. That comes from U and logos. That means well words. That's what it means. You say well words over someone at a funeral. Or you say, give a eulogy over them at some presentation. Well, this word prosper is this word, euodao. It comes from you and hodos. You means well. Hodos means way, road, journey. That's what it means. It means a well way. Well, evidently, if there's a well way, there's a bad way, isn't there? Look over. Let's go over here. Let's go back over here to Matthew 7. Matthew 7.
Hey, Jim, and that word health there?
I'm going to get to it.
Oh, okay.
Give me time.
I know you covered it 5 times already.
Give me time. We're going to get to health, okay? All right. Matthew 7. When these people take these verses and they twist them. Matthew 7, look here in verse 13. Enter ye in at the strait gate. The word strait is the word stenos. That means to be crowded around like going through a narrow opening. It means to be pressed and pressured. Enter ye in at the strait gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the way. The way is Broadway, isn't it? Why is it that we always name our streets down there where we put all the sin shops and the strip joints? Broadway. It comes from here. Broadway. And broad is the way. That word way, hodos. It's the word. There's 2 ways. One is broad, one is narrow. Broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. Many. People say, well, why don't everybody believe this message you preach, Jim Brown? Many go in the broad way. Because there is a well way. Because straight, stenos, is the gate. And narrow is the well way. There's 2 ways, isn't there? There's a broad way. There's a broad way. That's a bad way. And there is a narrow way. And that is the well way. And that is exactly what John was wishing for Gaius, was the narrow way. He said, narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few. Well, it just seems to me the majority doesn't believe this, Jim. Well, the majority is going to hell. 1 Corinthians 1:26. Not many wise, not many mighty, not many noble in this world are called. Not many politicians, not many senators, not many presidents, not many heads of companies, not many rich people. Not many of the noble in the world are called. Not many big superstars are going to heaven. Jesus said, I came to preach the gospel to the poor, to the brokenhearted, to the bruised. If you're going to show this to people, show it to them like this. Because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads to life, and few. So if you want to know what John was wishing for Gaius, he wasn't wishing him the tree. He wasn't wishing him the Holy Grail. He wasn't wishing him to be full of all that's in the world. What he was wishing for him was the narrow way. Now all you got to do is to know what the well way is. There's a well way and there's a bad way. The bad way, many go in. The well way is narrow. Few there be that find that. And these guys have taken this verse and twisted it. The word narrow is what you go after when you go into the narrow way. The word narrow is the word T-H-L-I-B-O, thalibo. And that means to go through tribulation. So what John was wishing for Gaius was the tribulation way, because that's the only way in. Now look at Acts 14:22. Acts 14:22. Paul is preaching at Lystra. I don't think I've read this many times. I keep quoting it. 14:22. This is Paul leaves. He goes on his first missionary journey. He goes up here, hits Pamphylia. He goes up here to Galatia. This is Galatia, right about where that yellow spot is, right in the center of Turkey. And he goes up here to Antioch. Antioch, they get angry at him because he stays there a week. They get jealous because he gets more people than they have, and they run him out. About 75 miles over here is a place called Iconium. These same Jews at Antioch are so jealous, they throw him out and run him out of town on a rail, and he's running for his life by night. He doesn't leave with his entourage. He's running, trying to save his life so he can preach. He doesn't leave with a lot of money. He gets over to Iconium. These same Jews are so angry, they stay angry all week long, and they come over there. And they drive him out of Iconium, and they go down to Lystra. And here's what happens at Lystra. He comes to Lystra. If you're going to read the life of Paul, Sherry and Tracy, if you're going to read the life of Paul, you start in the 13th chapter of Acts. 13th chapter of Acts here. Let's look here at Acts. And then you go to the 14th chapter, and he's still in his journey. Look here in verse 19. And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch, over here at Antioch, and from Iconium. They gather a bunch from Iconium. They're jealous of him. These are the Jews in the synagogue, and from Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. Don't sound like too much fun to me, does it to you? Doesn't sound like get rich. God wants you to have everything, does it to you? And when they stoned the man, they threw great big rocks at him. They'd throw a man off of a cliff. They'd throw these rocks down on him. He probably looked like he'd been in a severe car wreck if they'd had cars back then. Howbeit, as the disciples stood round about him, he rose up and came into the city. And the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe, just about 15 miles south of Lystra. Went about 15 miles south. And watch what he does. And when they had preached the gospel to that city and had taught many, they returned to Lystra, where he was stoned. They tried to kill him. Hey, now committing to Christ goes back in the fire of the enemy. It doesn't say, I want a safe way, let me out of here. They returned again to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them. Paul was all bandaged up and bound up when he went back over there. Exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God. How many times have I quoted that? That word tribulation is the form of the word narrow. It's the word T-H-L-I-P-S-I-S. It means to go through trials. That's the narrow way. That's the well way. There's two ways. You'll either seek the Holy Grail and try to fulfill the flesh, or you'll die to self. You'll either seek the tree. You'll seek the demons that'll give you 3 wishes, or the genies, or the genius, or the guardian angels. These things are not true. That's man's imagination. That's being possessed with the ancestors. That was their imagination. Now go back to John 14. This is the way to present this to these people. John 14. John 14, verse 5. Thomas saith unto him, Lord, John 14 and verse 5. Thomas saith to him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the holydays? How can we know the way? There's 2 ways, a broad way and a bad way. How can we know the holydays, the way? Jesus saith unto him, I am the holydays, the way. He said there's only 2 ways, didn't he? And the next statement, the end of this verse, he eliminates every other way. It's not money. He eliminates money by saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father by money. No man cometh unto the Father by a broad way. I am the narrow way. When you teach the true Jesus, the Jesus that died to save his elect, that we must through much tribulation enter the kingdom of God, that all that will have God in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution, 2 Timothy 3 and 12. Philippians 1:29, unto you it is given in the behalf of Christ, not only to believe upon him, but also to suffer for his sake, and go through the narrow way. That's not the tree. That's not the way of the demons. That's not the way of the Garden of Eden. That is not all that's in the world. It's narrow. And he said, no man comes to the Father but by me, the one narrow way. That's it. That's what John was wishing for Gaius. Now, if you look back go back over there. So we've eliminated every other way, hadn't we? Let's go back to 3 John. 3 John. I would that you prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers. The word health is Hugiaino. Hugiaino. It means uncorrupted in word is what it actually implies. It's the common word. Here's the same exact word. Go to 2 Timothy. Same word. Same word. 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy 4 in verse 3. 4 and verse 3. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. The word sound is this word, Hugiaino. It's uncorrupted in word. That's the common word that Paul would use when he was writing over in Titus, when he was writing in 1 Timothy, and he would say, speak those things that are sound doctrine. It's the same word that he used over in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 3. He says, if anyone teach otherwise and consent not to wholesome words. Uncorrupted words. What John was wishing for, guys, was not the tree. It was not the wishes of the demons or the genies. It was a well way by the uncorrupted Word of God. That's what that means. I don't care whether people like that or not. These guys at the Devil's Broadcasting Network, they are seeking the tree worship. They're seeking all that's in the world. They're seeking the wishes of the demons and the genies. That's what they're seeking. Okay, verse 4. Okay, verse 4 of what? 4, if any man teach otherwise and consent not to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness, he's proud, he knows nothing, but doting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness. Huh?
Chapter 4.
Okay, well I'll go back to that. From such withdraw thyself, but godliness with contentment is great gain. She's talking about chapter 4 of verse 4 of chapter 4 of 2 Timothy. And they shall turn away their ears from truth and shall be turned to fables. The word fables is M-U-T-H-O-S, muthos. It's our word myth. Christmas is a myth. It's a fairy tale is what it is. We said last week that, the last week before last, that fairies were demons. Demons started at Babel. It is a reinstitution of ancestor worship of the garden is what it is. Let's look at that. They will not endure sound doctrine. They'll turn to fables. They've turned to myths. They've turned to the tree. It's what they've turned to. Let's go over here. Let's go over here and see what the demons are. Go to Matthew 17. In the first century, when a man said he had a demon, he meant he had a headache. He was melancholy. He was sad. He wanted to go home. He was homesick. He had a broken leg. He got a new job. Good demons got you good things. Bad demons got you bad things. Caesar was called a good demon, a good god. The word demon is the word daemon, and it was interchangeable in the first century. If you look up the word daemon or daemonion, it will say, in the Strong's it will say deity. What is a deity? That's a god, isn't it? Now you mean that when Jesus would walk up to... The demons were said to have started at Babel. That's where the tree worship started. A demon was a god who was a man. Well, Nimrod was deified in the stars as Orion or Hercules. Orion was the great serpent killer. That's just the perversion of I'll put enmity between thee and the serpent, between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise his head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And in the stars, Nimrod was deified as Orion. And Orion is supposed to have he's got the serpent by the tail and he's stepping on his head. That's just a perversion of Christ is all it is. And when that started, that was the beginning of the demons. And all the old ancients said the demons started at Babel. That was in Genesis 11th chapter. That was the reinstitution of Adam and Eve worship. They were worshiping their ancestors, weren't they? Adam and Eve, the sign of an Adam and Eve. This is the sign here. They call that the tree of life. Actually, it was called the Ankh. And the Ankh is the worship of the womb and the ovaries of the woman. It's sex worship. What is America involved in? Sex worship, aren't they? You got to put a picture of a scantily clad woman in every advertisement if you want to sell tires or beer or don't matter what it is. We're involved in it. And we're seeking after the flesh, fulfilling the flesh, aren't we? So this Ankh, this is what they call the tree of life or the flowering tree. And when a woman is in her flower, what do they call that? Fertility, don't they? She's got fertile ovaries. That's what they call that. That's what Adam and Eve were involved in the garden when they weren't supposed to be taking of one another. And God said, who told you we're naked? They didn't even know they were naked. They conceived Cain while they were in their sin. That's why Cain is left out of the lineage of God in the 5th chapter of Genesis, because he was a bastard son of an Adam and Eve. What Nimrod started when he started the demon worship, he started the worship. They reinstituted the tree worship. And when you watch on a Saturday afternoon an old Steve Reeves movie, he's Hercules, and he's a man, isn't he? And he is a god, isn't he? Now, here's what people don't understand. When people wrestle around and say, how do you explain God being three? Let me put this up here, so I don't know if I've said this in a long time. There's not three gods, there's one God. The word God, E-L-O-H-I-Y-M, Elohim, Elohim is, it's the word God in the Hebrew, and it means judge, magistrate. That's what it means. God says, "Thou shalt not, Eve." And she said, "I'll judge that if you don't mind." Did she become a god? Yes. She was a little God, and she was a man. God made man, male and female, created he them. Eve was a man, and Adam was a god, and he was a man, wasn't he? They became their own judges, and what did they do when they were God men? They were demons, weren't they? Because what does demon mean? It means distribute fortunes. They were distributing all that's in the world. When you fulfill the lust of the flesh, that's all you do. You're involved in the origins of the Christ Mass. The tree worship, that's all you're involved in, and that's what they were involved in, and that's what a demon was. They were God men. It started in the garden, didn't it? The reinstitution of that was at Babel. When Nimrod started Babel, that's where all of the... I've done so much study. I've got so much documentation on the demons of the ancient world, what the first century people believe, what Hastings says it is, McClintock and Strong's. I've got many, many books. I've got one up here called... I hadn't even had time to get back into this. I got into this a couple years ago. The Demonic Imagination. It's man's imagination when he's involved in demons. There's no such thing. See, if you can cast a demon out of a man and he can get back up on his feet and go out there and just chase money in the world, then he don't have to repent. That's wrong. Repentance is a turning from self. If the love of money is the root of all evil, and a demon means to distribute fortunes, wherever there's a demon, there's a love of money, isn't there? Wherever there's a love of money, there's a demon. That goes back to the garden. Well, let me give you one other thing on that. They had a variation of this. Now, what was it they were seeking? The tree. What would you call the tree? Isn't that agriculture? Huh? They worshiped the agriculture god at the Christ Mass from December the 17th to December the 24th. They said they were going through these real long nights, and they were afraid in the ancient world they were not going to have any food, they were going to have famine, and the agriculture god was called Saturn. That, in the old ancient world, that was understood to be Cush, the father of Nimrod. And he was called Zeus in Greece, and the Celtic Zeus was Merlin. That's where it goes. Let me just read something to you before I go any further on this. It was Merlin. Read this to you. This is written by a witch. She knows more truth. She knows more truth than the Baptist preachers know. But she doesn't know she's telling truth. She's just going back to the old culture and the ancient world and telling you what all this meant. Listen to what she says here. It's amazing. She says, it's talking about King Arthur. Speaking of the goddess May Queen figure, he says, the Celtic mythologist Sir John Rhys asserted that the knights of the Round Table are barely disguised Welsh deities made acceptable to medieval audiences. They barely disguised them so that the medieval audiences would accept them. Well, if Babylon mothered all harlotry or all idolatry, this comes out of Babylon, doesn't it? All of it comes out of Babylon. She's a witch. She's a member of the Wicca Society of America. And all she does is go back historically and tell exactly what this stuff is out of ancient myth. Let me read this to you. Let's go back over it. Let's go over here to Matthew. Go to Matthew 17. Now what this is Adam and Eve worship. What are you worshiping when you're worshiping Adam and Eve? The tree, money, things, stuff. Fulfillment of the flesh, covetousness, wanting more. Is America involved in Adam and Eve worship? That is serpent worship. The serpent says, take what you want of the tree. People say, I'm not worshiping a tree and a serpent. Yes, you are. People will say, I'm not worshiping the Christmas tree. The word worship, one of the words worship is Z-E-T-E-O. It means to seek after. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Whatever you seek is what you worship. The word zeteo means to worship. Are you seeking the tree? Are you seeking your car? Are you seeking that woman? Are you seeking that house? Are you seeking your own looks? Are you seeking that ring? What are you seeking? That's what you worship. Whatever you put your mind on, that's your God. People say, we don't worship the tree. Certainly you do. Take the gifts away, take the tree away, take the holly away. Take all of the glutting and stuffing away and say, let's take all that we were going to spend this year on the Christ Mass. Let's go find some sweet little lady like this Lady Beulah. Probably a very poor lady. And let's pay her back house payments. Let's catch up her light bill. Let's go buy her some clothes and groceries and forget self. Do you think people want to do that? Don't take my tree away. You're not taking my tree away. I'm not giving up Christmas. You shouldn't give up Christmas till God deals with your heart to live holy before Him. Nobody should give up. Giving up Christmas. You don't give up Christmas? Keep drinking? Keep cussing? I don't celebrate Christmas, Mikey Mike. It's pagan. Well, so are you. Great day in the morning. Look here, let's go over here. It's the worship of Adam and Eve. Now, another variation for the sign, they had variations for it, was the Maltese cross, or what they call the solar cross. And when they separated the lines, the circle there, what they had was what they called in the ancient world a fire wheel. Now that is the swastika, a fire wheel, or Yule. Yule is the fire wheel, and Yule is the wreath. Let me show you this before I read this. Let me show you this. Here is the fire wheel. Let me show you this to you. Here it is right here. Now the Celts got their fire wheel from the ancient Nordic people. That is right there. It's the seasons of the year. It's the worship of the seasons of nature. Now what is that? Huh? It's the swastika. Let me show you what it is. The swastika's name is Yule. This is called Wheel of the Year. That's what the swastika is called. And I'm going to put it on the board for you, but before I do, let me read to you back in the glossary back here. Wheel of the Year, okay? Let me read this to you. Wheel of the Year. Hold on here.
That's probably a perversion of the eyes of the Lord, ain't it?
Well, let's don't talk about that. Come in. That'd be something subject to get into. Everything's a perversion of the eyes of the Lord. It is because the eyes of the Lord, the original eyes of the Lord, I will go ahead and say that. The eyes of the Lord was 7 stars in the left shoulder of Taurus. The 7 stars were said to bring up the crops in the spring. And that's what Glenn's talking about. I just hate to go there, but the 7 stars, when the Lord told Job, can you bind the sweet influences of Pleiades and loose the bands of Orion? Pleiades was the 7 stars in the left shoulder of Taurus. And the 7 stars were said to be the morning star, and that was said to draw up. Oh, there they are there. There's all the different swastikas. The 7 stars were said to draw up the sap in the spring, and that was God's promise to give crops in the spring. It's what His promise was. And to give Israel all that they needed. But what they did, they turned after the tree goddess, or the tree of the garden, and said, I want all that's in the world, and they conjured it up for themselves, didn't they? Well, that's what Glenn's getting at, is the Pleiades. And that's why the Lord says over in the 5th chapter of Amos, he said, don't seek Bethel or Gilgal, where they set up idol worship in northern Israel. Seek him who maketh the 7 stars in Orion. Orion was said to be the evening star. That was Hercules. In the winter that drew the sap down and had no fruits. God says, I can bind Pleiades when the spring comes, and I can loose Orion. You know what? Orion's loosed right now, isn't it? Yeah. What do y'all think is going to happen? Gary Mays called me the other day. He said, Jim, he's out at the prison. He said, I'm looking out over this fence, and he said, new leaves are coming on the trees. What happens when that happens? The sap comes up into the tree, doesn't it? The sap has to go down. Why? To keep the shrubs and the trees from freezing. If we get a hard freeze anytime, what's going to happen? It's going to kill all these shrubs and trees all over the country. Right now, Orion has been loosed. God says, I can loose Orion when God doesn't have to attack you and take all your food away with an army. He said, I'll send famine. What he said, I can loose the bands of Orion in the middle of winter. We are having a winter like we have never seen, aren't we? This is what's going to happen at the end of time. Orion is loose. And Gary said, there's new leaves coming on the trees.
Flowers coming up.
With the sap out there in the flowers and in the vines and in the apple trees and in the pear trees and in the peach trees, what will happen if God hits us with a hard freeze and it hits 10 degrees here one night? It'll kill everything. Prices will soar, won't they? That's what he's talking about. And instead of seeking God, they said, we'll seek it ourselves. Listen to this wheel of the year in the back here. Listen. Wheel of the year, a conceptualization of the eternal cycle of time. The pagan mythology, the goddess turns the wheel of the year. I think that's God, isn't it? And Nimrod was deified in mythology as the horned one, or he was called Kronos, and the goddess was called Chronos. Kronos. We get our word chronology from that. A chronometer is a timepiece. That's what the swastika is. It's the wheel of the year that brings the seasons. I'm going to show you that in a minute. It was called Yule. Yule was the swastika. It was the wreath. Let me read it to you. In pagan mythology, the goddess turns the wheel of the year, bringing everything to its season. The wheel of the year is symbolized by either a wreath. The swastika, the wheel of the year, is symbolized by a wreath. This year, put a swastika on your door instead of a Christmas wreath. If one of your kinfolks dies, send him a swastika. That's where it comes from. Isn't it amazing that we don't even know that Hitler was involved in fire worship? Himmler sent expeditions to Tibet, to the Tibetan fire worshippers. The fire worshippers of Tibet were called swastis. The swastika is an ancient culture sign. It was Yule. That's not one book. That's every book you can look in when you look at Yule.
They went after the Grail.
They went after the Grail is what they did. Hitler went after the Grail. Did you know that? Himmler sent a man after the Grail, and when he couldn't find it in France, he killed him. And Hitler said all of his ancestors were the sons of the gods that came down from heaven, the sons of the demons, the genies that came down from heaven, and they wanted to purify the races. Do you know that he was legitimately doing what he believed was right to purify the races? But do you know that he got his system from us? David gave me a tape. I've got it upstairs. I need to have some copies made of it. What was that system called? Do you remember? Yeah, well, it was euthanasia, but it was in Lynchburg, Virginia. I think Jerry Falwell was one of the products of one of those where they Sterilized women. Yeah, sterilized women. I think Jerry Falwell was one of the products of the sterile women.
The boys too, like the last.
They sterilized them, and Hitler got his system of sterilization, of purifying the races. We were doing that in the 20s. And their system, he started his system, he got it from America. Got the idea from us to purify. And we were purifying the races before Hitler was in World War II. We
have fairs.
Yeah.
Called the Well Family.
Yeah.
They would, you know.
And they were trying to keep a good family, and they were sterilizing Mongoloids. They were sterilizing people they thought who were lower classes, people who weren't as smart, and we were purifying the races in America in the 20s in Lynchburg, Virginia. That's why I say I think Jerry Falwell was a product of one of those sterile women. He is a lame brain. He said, Jerry Falwell said, now God's got a day in which he'll judge the world, and no man knows the day nor the hour, and if anybody finds it out, he'll change it. You got to be a numbskull to say that. Now, let me show you this. I've got to show you this. So it is the wreath, a ring, a snake holding its tail in its mouth, or an 8-spoked wheel. What amazes me is the Assyrian war chariots were 6 spokes, and their peacetime chariots were 8 spokes. Let me show you this. Let me give this to you, because this is so amazing. This is called the Wheel of the Year. This is the Swastika, or Yule. I'm going to put it down so everybody can see it. It is nothing but the old ancient worship of nature. What did Eve worship in the garden? She worshiped nature, didn't she? The tree. And I don't know whether it was literal, but I do know this. It was a picture of all that's in the world, and I know the Old Testament is a shadow. Now let me put this down. In the ancient world, the Celts got their Yule from the Nordic people. Yule was the child of the sun in the ancient world. They worshiped nature, they worshiped the tree, and they said that the evergreen was a magical tree because it could live through the winter in the sub-zero weather. So they hung their greenery around their pagan temples, the holly. They worshiped the holly king, or the holly god. And they said the holly god and the oak god, it was a battle of the trees. Battle of the trees. Wait a minute, where'd that start? I've got this tree book, but let me read this to you. Battle of the trees. Listen to this. Battle of the trees. Where do you think that started? The garden. 2 trees. The knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Adam looks at the tree of life and he looks at the knowledge of good and evil and says, I'll take that one. It's the battle of the trees, isn't it? Listen to the battle of the trees. The battle took place. Well, let me read the first paragraph. If you are truly interested in working with the tree symbolism and energies on an in-depth basis throughout the year, it might be worth your time to study the mythic poem known as the Battle of the Trees, or Cadgadoo in Welsh. It is also sometimes called the Battle of Arkern, or Ochern, which are alternate names for the Welsh otherworld. The otherworld was the underworld, and that's where the demons lived. The poem is attributed to the famous bard Taliesin. The Battle of the Trees took place during a war which was fought to secure 3 things for humankind. What do you think the 3 things are? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. They have perverted it here. They're talking about the dogs, the deer, and the lapwing, but we know what the original 3 things were, don't we? It's the fulfillment of the flesh. That's the demon worship of the garden. The battle of the trees started in the garden, didn't it? You set up a hierarchy of sacred trees, which was used by the Celts and the Druids for worship. The Druids worshiped the oak. Now, let me give you this. I'm going to draw this on the board. This is Yule, is what it is. It is the original. Here it is. This is where they've got it here. Now, when you had the reverse swastika, it was called a sign of peace. It's called a sign of peace. Hitler didn't start this. He worshipped swastikas, Tibetan Buddhist sun worshippers. Said his people came down from the gods. All right, let me see here.
Didn't the Indians have the reverse of that?
Yes, the American Indian, you can see. They actually carry what we call the Iron Cross. They have that. You can actually see that on a lot of American Indians. Did you know that? And that is a form of nothing but the magician's cross, or when you connect, it is a form of the swastika. The swastika is nature worship of the ancient world. It's the tree worship of the garden. If Babylon mothered it all, it started in the garden. That was the agriculture worship that they worshiped Saturn, and they started on the 17th of December and went through the 24th, through the swastika child, the Yule child in the fire, and he was resurrected in the next morning in the form of the tree, the giver of all divine gifts to man. Look here, let me show you this. Now you have these are larger. This is the reason I'm doing it in two different styles, because these are like longer here. Okay. If you'll notice, it says the summer arm, that's the thick, that's represented by the man. You see the sign of the man? The sign of the tree worship, or Eve, that's the thinner one right here. Now let me just, what they worshiped were 8 sun festivals of the year. That's what they worshiped. It was the old ancient festival worship. Here's the first one, was called Mabon. The second one was right here at this point. These were like erratic points of the wheel of the year. This one right here was called Lugnasah. Now this one right here, this outer point was here, was called Ostara. We get the word Easter, or Ishtar, or Ashtorth. That's what Solomon allowed his wives to keep. Ashtaroth, Ishtar, Easter, Ostara. Now this point right here was called Imbolg. All these were 8 festivals, sun festivals of the year. The one down here was called Midsummer. This one right here was Beltane, B-E-A-L, or Baltan is the way it's pronounced, B-A-L-T-A-I-N-E. This one down here on this corner was called Yule. And this one right here was called Samhain. And Samhain is what we call Halloween, or All Saints' Eve. Now this is nothing but the fire wheel. It's the nature wheel of the year. It's the worship, and it's identified. Let me give you this. How much time do I have? 11. Oh, man. Let me come back. It's identified with, let me give you what it's identified with. It's identified with the Bridge Cross. Bridge Cross. I'll give you this real quick, and then I'll go back over here to Matthew 17. The Bridge Cross. Here's the Bridge Cross right here. It's worship of the wheat. It's the worship of nature. It's the worship of food. See, God says, I'll give you food if you worship me and you obey me. There's the Bridge Cross, and that's identified with the wheel of the year. Let me read Brid. Brid, also Bridget, or B-R-I-D-G-E-T, or B-R-I-G-E-T, or bride. That's a perversion of the bride, the church. A brigade, her name comes from the old Irish Brig meaning power. Her Gaulish name is Brigindo, and she is probably the source of the Anglo goddess Brigantia or Britannia, and we are British in our nature, or Celtic. It's the old British god. See, we had 13 colonies that broke off of Great Britain. We are a British Celtic system. People don't study the Celts. In order, I've said this before, in order to take the Christ Mass, well, let me put it over here. In order to take the Christ Mass, and the Puritans in early America who outlawed this, they came from a Celtic England. You've got to go back to the Celtic system, the Celtic fire worship of the Christ Mass, in order to go all the way back to the old ancient Nordic world, or the Scandinavians who worshipped Odin or Woden, who was a form of Adonis, and that takes you back to Yule, or Thor's hammer. Thor was one of the children of the sun, and Thor's hammer was a swastika. It was the wreath. In order to get back to Baal that Israel worshiped, all of this goes back. We have to take the path back through the Celtic system, through the Nordics, and then go back to the Baal that God crushed Israel for 2,600 years for worshiping. It's the Christ Mass. I don't care what anybody says. That's what it is. It's the tree of Isaiah 44, Jeremiah 44, Jeremiah 10. It's the tree when they took a tree that would not rot over in the 40th chapter of Isaiah. What is a tree that would not rot? They decked it with silver and gold. It is the tree of the garden. It's the tree of self. It's mass, eating one's own flesh. Let me give you this. She was the great goddess of Ireland. She was deified as a saint by the Irish, to get the Irish to accept her. She was called the fairy spirit. Fairies were demons. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. The fairy spirit whose keening was soothsaying. It was the ability to see, a seer, see the future. Whose keening, that's what keening was soothsaying. Keening can be heard at night before death. In the 5th century, her shrine at Kildare was desecrated and adopted as a holy site by Christian missionaries who turned her into Saint Bridget, the saint bride, the bride that's the saint. That's a perversion of the church. They latched on. Now, we're still talking about the Bridge cross. The word brid, we get the word Bridget, or the bride. They latched onto her sky goddess aspect and nicknamed her the Queen of Heaven. Wait a minute, where do we find that? In Jeremiah 44? Jeremiah said, don't worship the Queen of Heaven. They said, we will do as we please. And the Queen of Heaven was Milita. And Milita means female mediator. That's the Mary of Roman Catholicism. They say she mediates between what this is, between God and Jesus. Well, Aphrodite means wrath subduer. They said she can subdue the wrath. This is the worship of the ancestors. Adam and Eve worship, and it's the worship of the tree. It's the serpent worship. It's the worship of money. That's what the devil's broadcasting network is involved in. They're worshiping trees and serpents. You say, I don't worship a serpent. You do if you seek self and things and stuff. I don't worship a tree. You do if you seek things and stuff. Yes, you do. Don't tell me you don't worship a tree. You worship what you seek. Look over here in Matthew 17. These people thought they had a demon. Jesus never admitted any of them had gods in them. Thou believest that there is one God, not many demons or many gods. Look here. Look at verse 14. Matthew 17. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son. He is a lunatic and sore vexed, for oftentimes he falleth into the fire. The American Indian said, when they fell into the fire, it was one of their totems that pushed them into it. It was one of their demons, their ancestors. and oft into the water, and I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, the daemon, the desire for self. And he departed out of him, and the child was cured. Therapeuo, T-H-E-R-A. P-E-U-O. We get our word therapeutic. He was therapeutically healed. He was cured physically. They said whenever they had any kind of physical ailment in the first century, they had a demon. We know that's not true. If a headache was caused by a demon, a stomachache was caused by a demon, cancer was caused by a demon. Wait a minute, I think I've heard that before, hadn't y'all? The demon of cancer. Speak to that demon. No, you're talking to Adam and Eve is who you're talking to. And you can't talk to the dead. That's necromancy. That's against God's law. The penalty of that is death. You talk to St. Nicholas. He is a 4th century Roman Catholic bishop. You talk to him. You're talking to the dead. The penalty for that in the Old Testament, you had to die to talking to St. Nicholas, the patron saint, the demon of the children. Let's read on. He was therapeutically cleansed from that very hour. Then came the disciples apart and said, why could we not cast him out? Casting out demons is repentance, is what it is. And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if ye have a faith as a grain of mustard seed, not as small as a grain of mustard seed. Mustard seed was the smallest of seeds, and it had to grow tremendously. We have to add to our faith. Faith is dying to self, isn't it? Yes, it is. If you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove. That's the mountain of Babylon, isn't it? But mountains were capital cities of empire, and Babylon was a destroying mountain. She was a mountain of pride in the 51st chapter of Jeremiah. A mountain was a city that ruled. You got two mothers. You got the mother of harlots, and you got Jerusalem is the mother of us all in the 4th chapter of Galatians. Remove, and nothing shall be possible to you. Howbeit, this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting. The word kind is the word G-E-N-O-S, and it means kindred. These so-called ancestors that you think you've got in you, nobody has got ancestors dwelling in them, do they? No. In the 16th chapter of Luke, the rich man died and in hell. Lazarus died and was carried to Abraham's bosom. They don't hover around here possessing people. This is familiar spirit worship. What is the familiar spirits that we worship? Adam and Eve, the tree of the garden. The serpent was the first familiar, wasn't he? A familiar is an animal you keep nearby, and if you can't keep the spirit of your ancestor in you, you keep it an animal close by so he can advise you. Who gave the first advice as a familiar? The serpent. Eat of all that's in the world. That's all it's talking about. I wish I had enough. Let me show you one other thing in here. This kind goeth not out by prayer and fasting. The only fast that was instituted in Israel was on the Day of Atonement. They called that afflicting the soul. Afflicting the soul. And the word is A-N-A-H, anah. It means to humble self. Wait a minute. Humble self, you mean that's how demons go out? It's by getting rid of the flesh, the distributing of fortunes, the tree, the serpent worship. It's getting rid of the familiar spirits, our family ancestors, Adam and Eve, when they became their own gods. And when God says, thou shalt not, and you say, I'll judge this, and I don't think God means what he says, I can fulfill the flesh, then you're worshiping your ancestors, and you got Adam and Eve in you. When you humble self, what's the word humble in the New Testament? Tapeino. Tapeinoa means to level mountains and hills. The word mountain is O-R-O-S, and that means what arises above the plain. What is it that rises above the plain? Self! Isn't it? And repentance is turning from self and humbling self on the day of atonement, the day of kafar. What is kafar? Means to cover. Kofar, the noun form, means to stain with a dye. When the Lord said pitch the ark with pitch, kafar with kofar. That's the meaning of the word baptize. Baptized, there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. It is not water, it's blood. He's washed us from our sins in His own blood. How do demons go out? By a blood baptism, by the death of self. That's how they go out. That's how Adam and Eve goes out. That's how the tree goes out of our life. That's how all this Celtic stuff that we have held on to goes out of our life. Let me give you one thing here that's so interesting. In fact, well, let me just give this to you. Here's this word genos. We get the word gene from it. This kind, genos is the word. If you look this up in your word study concordance, in Mark 7:26, the word genos is the word nation. Mark 9:29, it's the word kind. In Acts 4:6, it's the word kindred. You don't believe people have actually got kinfolks living in them, do you? Ancestors? Familiar spirits? It's the word country in Acts 4:36. In Acts 7:13, this word, this kind, genos. In Acts 7:13, Joseph's kindred. You mean you actually believe that with these people who said they had demons, had kinfolks living in them? Yeah, they did. They had Adam and Eve in them, didn't they? They had desire for the tree. They had self. The way self goes out is by death to self, by blood baptism. That's where you get rid of self. It's by a daily cross, isn't it? And Jesus equated baptism as a daily cross. It's what He equated it with. Not water, blood. A blood baptism of the first century was a death. He said, can you be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with? How are demons cast out? By that. By self-dying. By dying to the tree. By dying to the familiar spirits. By dying to trying to come up and distribute your own swastika, your own Yule, your own seasons. By making your own nature. That's divided up into 4 seasons, that swastika. Let me give you that. It's into 4 seasons: planting, growing, fallow, harvest. That's what the swastika is divided into. That's Yule. Aren't we just seeking stuff? What is probably the most important thing in our day? Food, isn't it? What does everybody say? Where are we going to eat? What are we going to eat? When do we get to eat? Isn't that it? That's it, isn't it? These serve not our Lord, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches they deceive the hearts of the simple. The belly was said to be the seat of all sensual desires. That's all this is, people. It's the seeking of self. And how does self go out? By fasting. What is a fast? It's getting rid, it's quitting fulfilling self, isn't it? When you fast, you quit eating of self, don't you? You quit fulfilling self. The true fast is found in the 58th chapter of Isaiah. It's dying. You can't fulfill the flesh anyway. Look here. I'll just give you this and I'll quit here. I got so many things to show you on this. This kind goeth not out by prayer and fasting. Children of the stock of Abraham. It's the word stock in Acts 13:26. Acts 17:28, it's the word offspring. This offspring goeth not out by prayer and fasting. That sure would have made it clearer, wouldn't it? Why do you think the translators translate it that way? Well, God probably put it in their mind to keep us confused, to make people actually think they actually had demons. It's the word offspring in 17 and 29 of Acts. In Acts 18 and 2, Aquila born in Pontus. It's the word born. Don't sound like literal demons to me, does it to you? No. They just thought they had their ancestors in them. That's what the man over in Luke the 8th chapter, he said, I got all these legion, these female demons that are with me. Jesus said, Tisoi. Soi means the ancestors through the father's side of the family. He said, what fellowship are you fellowshipping with through your father's side of the family? The guy sat there in all of his imagination said, I got all of these female demons in me through my father's side of the family. Baloney. A Jew named Apollos, born. Same word as Genos. 1 Corinthians 12:10. Kinds of tongues. That means different kinds or nationalities. Diversities. Kinds of voices. 2 Corinthians 11:26. Countrymen. These countrymen go not out by prayer and fasting. Your own kinfolks, Adam and Eve, doesn't go out but by death to self. There was only one fast, one official legal fast in Israel. That was on the day of baptism, atonement. Atonement was when they sprinkled the blood on the Ark of the Covenant, wasn't it? When we're sprinkled with the blood of Christ, that's how you go through a blood baptism. That's death to self. That's how demons go out. That's how your ancestors go out. That's how the swastika goes out of your life. You still got it in your life because you're trying to fulfill and fill up your agricultural God. You want all your stuff and things and money and me and self and all that we want. Countrymen, it's the word nation in Philippians. It's the word nation in Galatians 1:14. It's the word Philippians 3 and 5. It's the word stock. 1 Peter 2 and 9, generation. Revelation 22:16. It's the word offspring of David. We ain't got our ancestors living in us, only in one respect. We got Adam and Eve there, and we're involved in the nature worship. The original swastika was the tree of the garden. That's the original Yule. What is Yule? What's a Yule? What is a wreath made out of?
Green.
It's usually an evergreen, isn't it? That's what they were looking after. The tree of the garden. This is one of the best books. This woman's a witch. Isn't that great? And she was equated with the Romans Minerva. Minerva was equated with Diana. Diana was said to be the goddess of the seas. And the Celtic Zeus was murdered, and he was in love with Our Lady of the Lake. And that was Morgan Le Fay. And Morgan Le Fay comes from Moor, means sea, and F-A-I-R-Y. Fairy was a sea demon. And the sea demon was Dagon. Dagon, Dag means fish, and Venus was equated with the fish. And Dagon was the sun god, or the fire god of the Philistines. I'm going to get to Dagon next week. The mitre of Dagon, what was it? Where did the Mass start in Roman Catholicism? The mitre of Dagon. Let me show you the mitre of Dagon. Let me see here. I've got it right here. Here it is. Look here. Here's Dagon. Here's Dagon, the fish god. It was the deification of Noah. There it is right there. You see the pointed? There it is right there. The fish's body, it was said that the great fish came out of the sea and brought all the good gifts to men, mathematics and the arts and scientists. It was the deification of Noah that they worshiped. They deified Adam and Eve. All man does is deify ancestors. They deify someone and then say you got it in you. That was nothing but the deification of Noah. And when that fire worship was put into the Roman Catholic Church, that's the fish's mouth, the mitre of the Pope. When the fish's mouth is closed, that's the way it was worn. That's the way it's worn on the hats of the clan. The clan worshipped. The clan has got a swastika on their shoulder. They're supposed to have. The priests of Baal wore tall white pointed hats, white sheets, and worshipped a flaming cross on Lady Day in the ancient world. Well, I wonder where that comes from. You see, it's the Muslims worship Allah, so David Duke and Louis Farrakhan are brothers, and they don't know that. They're both maniacs, aren't they? That's it. What is that? Here it is right here. I mean, you got it everywhere. It's Dagon. It's the deification of Noah. There it is right there. You see? And that's the robes of the Pope. There it is right there, the fish. And he was deified as the fish god or the merman. She was called the mermaid. And Morgan Le Fay, Zeus, the Celtic Saturn, which was Merlin, was in love with Our Lady of the Lake, and all the Catholic churches called it Our Lady of the Lake Catholic Church. Our Lady of the Snows, Our Lady of this. You always got the Lady of the Lake. And Morgan Le Fay was the sea demon. And all the old ancient fishermen said, back in the 1600s, they said the whale was the great demon of the sea. Isn't that amazing? We have really twisted all of this, haven't we? And Morgan Le Fay was the fairy or the demon sister of Arthur. It's all just a perversion of the truth, and this kind goeth not out. Self. What we've done, we've instituted all of these fairy tales. And why have we done that? To make life easy for ourselves. We've done it to just put all this stuff into our life so we can have what we want, and we have fairy taled it, and God says, don't give any heed to these fables. And that's what we're involved in. That's all Christ's Mass is. It's nothing but the Adam and Eve worship. It's the swastika worship. There's Thor's hammer right there. Thor was the virgin-born son in the ancient world. How much have I got to say on this? I got so much, there's no way I can get to it all. Y'all want to look at this? This woman she's good. She doesn't even know that she's given me 1,000,000 rounds of ammunition to shoot at the Baptist with. You don't even know that. She is let me just read something she said and I'll quit. But this woman is a witch, is what she is. I mean a real witch. I don't mean a witch, I mean a witch. She is a member of, let me see here. She's a member of see if I can find it here. I got to read one thing she said. She's smarter than most Baptists I know. I mean, the thing is, she at least researches. She's a graduate of the University of Texas. She now lives in the Midwest where she's continuing her formal graduate studies in cultural history. She is a member of the Indiana Historical Society, the Authors Guild, the Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance, and is active in her local Irish Arts Association. She's got one of the best bibliographies back here. She studied some of the tremendous things. But she's smart. She's smarter than the Baptists I was raised around. She says, rest assured that no historian who values his or her credibility or future career deliberately sets out to lie about anything. If you're a historian, you want to find out the truth, don't ask a politician, ask a historian. He can't afford to lie because his credibility is going to go down the drain. But the conclusions they draw from the same sources can vary greatly. The best way to assess history, or anything else for that matter, is to read all you can get your hands on. Isn't that right? All you can get your hands on, and include in that study many points of view, and then decide for yourself based on knowledge. This woman is exactly right. Based on knowledge, what you believe to be right. She doesn't even quote the Bible in here, and I see it all through it. Terrific book. She will give us. If I went into Druanica, the Druids, they worshipped a god called Druanica, a fir tree who probably had her origins in Gaul. The root of her name, Druce, means oak, and links her also with oak trees and with the Druids. Today she is associated with the Dryads, the tree fairies. Who were the tree demons who distributed fortunes to themselves? Adam and Eve. That's the original familiar spirits, isn't it? Y'all want to take a look at this? Come up. This is a terrific book. And Brooks kept saying, I wonder if Morgan Le Fay has to do with fairies. And I said, hey. And I just picked the Bullfinch's mythology up. See, mythology is based on fact. Mythology is not originated in some false thing. Mythology was based on Christ. You know, I taught on the gospel and the stars and went into some of that. I'll just read this for Brooks' sake. Morgana, an enchantress identified with the Lady of the Lake. Y'all do know we got a Lady of the Lake Catholic Church here, don't you? You got them all over America. That was Morgana, Lady of the Lake. That was just the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table was nothing but thinly disguised sun worshippers. And also with Morgan Le Fay, the fairy sister of King Arthur. Morgan Le Fay, the fairy sister of King Arthur, one of the principal characters in the Arthurian romance, and the Celtic legend generally was known as Morgane. Let's pray. Father, help us to understand that there's a false teaching going on about self. Lord, if our kinfolks go out of us, it's because we got this old flesh in us. All flesh here, Lord, comes from Adam and Eve. That's our familiar spirits, Lord. And it goes out by death to self, by a blood baptism. That's truly fasting of this old flesh. Lord, we know that's a spiritual fast to get rid of self. Help us, God, to understand that we've been perverted and there's a great perversion in the world. That's all I'm trying to do, Lord, is expose this great deception. God will praise you and glorify you. God, help us to understand clearly. I don't even know how to speak this thing to people. Maybe if we say enough, it'll begin to clarify to the elect. You know how frustrated some of us get because we want to be able to impart these truths. Help us to understand truth and help us to impart it to those. We know that some can't understand these great in-depth studies, but at least, Lord, help to understand they have to die to self. They have to go through a blood baptism, a daily cross. You said if we don't do that, we're not your disciple. Thank you, Father, for truth. We give you praise for all things in Jesus' name. Amen.